There are moments when life feels too heavy, when you're physically drained, emotionally exhausted, and spiritually empty. You've done all you can, but it still feels like it's not enough. The weight is too much, and your strength is gone. But here's the truth that your heart needs to hear. When you feel weak, God is your strength. Your weakness isn't a flaw. It's not a failure. It's an invitation. An invitation to stop striving, to stop pretending you're okay when you're not, and to lean into the one who never grows weary. God's strength doesn't show up when you're at your best. It shines brightest when you're at your weakest. Think of a branch trying to hold itself up without the tree. It would snap under the pressure because it was never meant to stand alone. The branch's strength comes from staying connected to the tree. In the same way, your strength doesn't come from pushing harder or pretending you're strong. It comes from staying connected to God. Weakness says, I can't do this. Faith says, I don't have to, God will carry me. Exhaustion says, I'm not enough. Grace whispers, you were never meant to be. I am enough for you. The beauty of God's strength is that it's not dependent on your effort. You don't have to earn it. You just have to receive it. His power isn't waiting for you to get everything right. It's available in the middle of your mess, your doubts, your struggles. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Not because he found strength in himself, but because he discovered the secret of relying on God's power. A power that doesn't fade. A strength that never runs out. So today, if you feel weary, if your heart feels heavy, if you're tired of trying to be strong, pause. Breathe. Surrender. You don't have to carry it all. God's strength is enough. His grace is sufficient. And His arms are strong enough to hold you, especially when you can't hold yourself. Weakness has a way of making us feel small, fragile, and even ashamed. We live in a world that praises strength, independence, and self-sufficiency, convincing us that admitting we're weak is a sign of failure. But in God's eyes, weakness isn't failure. It's the starting point of His power. God doesn't expect you to be strong all the time. In fact, He never asked you to carry life's burdens alone. His invitation has always been simple. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Not after you've figured it all out, not after you've fixed everything, but right now, right here, in your weakness. Think about a child learning to walk. They stumble, fall, and get back up, over and over again. But the parent doesn't expect perfection. They're there, arms open, ready to catch, support, and cheer. God's love for you is the same. He's not disappointed when you fall. He's right there, ready to be your strength when your legs can't carry you anymore. Weakness says, I'm falling apart. Grace says, let me hold the pieces. Fear says, I can't do this. Faith whispers, but I can, through Him who gives me strength. When you're exhausted, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, that's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of something beautiful, because it's in those broken places that God steps in, not just to patch you up, but to show you a strength that isn't based on your ability, but on His unshakable power. Paul said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. God isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for surrender, for hearts willing to say, I can't do this on my own, but I trust that you can. So today, if you feel like you're barely holding on, if your strength is gone, if your heart feels heavy, you're exactly where you need to be. Because it's in that space where God's strength shines the brightest. Not in your perfection, but in your dependence. Not in your striving, but in your surrender. You don't have to be strong enough. You just have to be willing to lean on the one who is. And in him, you'll find strength you never knew you had. There's a unique kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical activity. It comes from carrying burdens your heart was never meant to hold alone. The pressure to be strong for everyone else, to hold it all together, to hide the cracks so no one sees you struggling. But here's the beautiful truth. God isn't waiting for you to be strong. He's waiting for you to be honest. You don't have to pretend with God. He sees the fears you hide, the tears you wipe away, the silent battles no one else knows about. And still, he's not disappointed. He's not asking you to just be stronger. He's inviting you to rest in his strength. Because his strength isn't for the moments when you feel capable. It's for the moments when you don't. Think of a bridge carrying the weight of cars, trucks, and people. The bridge doesn't rely on its own ability to stay standing. It's supported by pillars, foundations beneath the surface, holding it steady. God is that foundation for you. You might feel the weight of life pressing down, but you're held up by a strength far greater than your own. Weakness says, I can't take one more step. Faith whispers, you don't have to. God will carry you. Doubt says, I'm not enough. Grace answers, you were never meant to be. But I am. The beauty of faith isn't found in your ability to be strong. It's found in your willingness to be weak in front of God. Because it's in that space, when you let go of control, that his power steps in. His strength doesn't just fill the gaps where yours runs out. It becomes the very foundation you stand on. Paul understood this when he wrote, Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. Imagine that, boasting in weakness. Not because weakness feels good, but because it's the gateway to experiencing God's strength in ways you never could on your own. So today, if you feel like you're running on empty, like you've got nothing left to give, pause, breathe, surrender. You don't have to be the strong one. You just have to be willing to lean on the one who is. His grace is enough. His power is enough. And even when you're weak, especially when you're weak, his strength will hold you steady. There's a quiet kind of struggle that comes with feeling weak. It's not always loud or dramatic. It's the silent battles you fight within, the moments when you're smiling on the outside but falling apart on the inside. But here's the truth that never changes. When you feel weak, God is your strength. Your weakness doesn't disqualify you from God's love. It draws him even closer. He doesn't turn away from your struggles. He leans in. The parts of you that feel too broken, too tired, too fragile, those are the very places where his power shines the brightest. Because his strength isn't just for the strong. It's for the weary, the worn out, the ones who are barely holding on. Think about Elijah, one of the boldest prophets in the Bible. After facing incredible battles, he found himself under a tree, exhausted and overwhelmed, praying, I've had enough, Lord. He felt done, emotionally, spiritually, physically drained. But instead of scolding Elijah for his weakness, God met him there. He provided rest, nourishment, and gentle reassurance. That's what God does. He meets you in your weakness with compassion, not condemnation. Weakness says, I can't keep going. God says, I will carry you. Fear whispers, you're alone in this. God's voice thunders, I will never leave you nor forsake you. The world tells you to be strong, to push through, to hide your weakness. But God invites you to do the opposite, to bring your weakness to him, to lay down the mask, to stop striving and start resting. Because his grace isn't something you earn by being strong. It's a gift you receive when you admit you're not. And here's the beautiful thing. God's strength isn't just enough. It's more than enough. It's not limited by your feelings, your circumstances, or your doubts. When you reach the end of your strength, that's where His begins. Not as a temporary boost, but as a constant, unshakable source of power that never runs out. So today, if you feel weary, if your heart is heavy, if you're struggling to take the next step, you're not alone. God is with you, not waiting for you to get it together, but holding you together, even when you feel like you're falling apart. You don't have to be strong enough, because God already is, and His strength is yours, right here, right now. All you have to do is lean in. There's a kind of exhaustion that runs deeper than physical tiredness. It's the heaviness in your chest when life feels too overwhelming, the ache in your heart when you've been holding it all together for too long. But here's the truth that never changes. When you feel weak, God is your strength. Weakness isn't something to be ashamed of. It's an opportunity to experience God's power in a way you never could on your own. We often think that faith means being strong all the time, but that's not true. Faith is about knowing where to turn when you're not strong. It's not about having it all together. It's about trusting the one who holds it all together. Think about the story of Gideon. He felt unqualified, insecure, and too weak to fulfill the mission God gave him. His first response wasn't confidence. It was doubt. How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest, and I am the least in my family. But God didn't choose Gideon because he was strong. God chose him to show that His strength shines brightest through our weakness. Weakness says, I don't have what it takes. God says, I am all that you need. Fear whispers, you're not enough. Grace declares, you were never meant to be. I am enough for you. When life feels like too much, you don't need to push harder or pretend you're okay. You just need to pause and lean into the one who promises to be your refuge and strength. You don't have to carry the weight alone. You don't have to figure it all out. You simply have to rest in the truth that His strength is made perfect in your weakness. God's strength doesn't show up because you've done enough to earn it. It shows up because He loves you. He's not waiting for you to get stronger. He's inviting you to surrender, to let go of the need to be everything for everyone, and to trust that He is everything you need. So today, if your heart feels heavy, if your mind is racing, if you're weary from carrying burdens that feel too big, breathe. Pause. Surrender. You're not failing. You're not falling apart. You're exactly where God's strength can meet you. You don't have to be strong. You just have to be willing to lean on the one who is. And in His arms, you'll find a strength that never runs out. At some point, we all reach the end of ourselves. The strength we thought we had runs out. The confidence we leaned on fades, and all that's left is the raw, fragile reality of our weakness. But here's the beautiful truth that stands firm when everything else feels shaky. When you feel weak, God is your strength. God's strength isn't a distant force you have to chase. It's right here, closer than your next breath. It's not something you have to earn or achieve. It's a gift, freely given, especially when you're at your lowest. The moments you feel like you're falling apart are often the moments when God is holding you the closest. Think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. Even He, fully God, fully human, felt the crushing weight of weakness, grief, and overwhelming sorrow. My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death, He said. But even in that moment, drenched in sweat and tears, He leaned into the Father's strength. Not my will, but yours be done. His surrender wasn't a sign of defeat. It was the path to victory. Weakness says, I'm breaking. God says, I'm the one who holds you together. Fear says, you're all alone in this. God whispers, I will never leave you or forsake you. Your weakness isn't the end of your story. It's the place where God's grace begins to shine the brightest. His power isn't waiting for you to be perfect. It's made perfect in your imperfection. When you've reached the end of your strength, you've only just reached the beginning of His. So today, if you feel like you have nothing left to give, if your heart is tired, if your spirit feels crushed under the weight of life, pause, breathe, let go. You don't have to hold it all together. You don't have to be the strong one. You just have to let God be who He's always been. Your refuge, your provider, your strength. You are not weak because you need help. You are strong because you know where to find it. And His strength, it never runs out. It never fades. It's holding you right now, even when you feel like you're falling apart. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. And even in your weakest moments, you are wrapped in the unshakable strength of the God who loves you more than you can imagine.